Welcome everybody to Exceptional Effort Business Sunday. I'm here with Julian White, Pete Keogh, and Ingrid is an apology. And I'm Damien Andrews. Today we are talking about coping internally when you're under pressure. And in today's environment, and probably in any environment, there are pressures that we have to deal with, and how we manage ourselves in those situations is a great indicator of how we're going to come out of that. I mean, how important is your internal processes when we're under pressure?
It's a pretty good question, isn't it, Damien, in this environment? But even outside of this, if we go back to pre-COVID, there's always pressures in people's lives and business, and some people cope with it better than others. I think over time, and I actually did a video on this week about what triggers you, and we all get triggered when we're under pressure, and people react in different, I think, ways. So under pressure, people can sort of crawl under a rock, they run away, they come out swinging, and I think, if you're going to react in a non-pleasant way, then we can all feel that bubbling coming up, that not so much rage. It's really is stepping back to taking a deep breath, and just trying to, as what do they say? I'm not going to say anything because I might regret what I say, sort of thing. But the pressure is around us in this environment, and I think if you're a business owner or a leader, this is what really sorts out, the men from the boys, so to speak, where you can accept and control the different grenades that get thrown at you, because people look to you to stay cool, calm and collective. And to do that, it's a myriad of things, I think, that you've got to process to be able to do that.
I just support what Julian just said. There's so many different levels of that stress and pressure, and it comes down to also experience of what's worked before and what hasn't worked before. And again, that can change at any moment. Over probably the last 25 years, I've developed an emotional defense ladder rung, I suppose you can call it. And if it's too much, too quick, the first ladder rung, and they all start with D, the first one is distance. If it's too much, walk away. Because as Julian said before, sometimes you're going to say stuff that you're not ready for, and you're probably going to regret. So distance, space yourself, give yourself a little bit of time. But sometimes we haven't got that time, and it has to be downright, we've got to act now. The second D is your mental defense. Are you thinking the right thoughts with your space, with your first D, distance? Are you writing stuff down to get your thoughts from the outside, from the inside to the outside? Having that good mental defense. The third D is discuss. What sort of affirmations, what things can you repeat to yourself to give yourself that confidence, or have that learned colleague, family member, trusted friend that you can talk things through with, and hopefully with that you can diffuse. So that's the fourth D. Try and diffuse the situation, or try and diffuse yourself, so you can think and act more clearly in the moment. And all else fails, if it's too much, try and distract yourself. Give yourself other things to do, and let that sort of pot boil down just a little bit. So when you've got the strength again, you can go back and go to number 3, discuss. Go back to number 2, check your mental defense. And that's worked really, really well for myself and my clients over a long time. I know, boys, that was a little bit of a lot then, but
that's good.
That's some great tips, I think, and that comes back to that emotional intelligence of being able to recognize within yourself that you're feeling that those emotions are bubbling up, as you said, Pete, and then being able to have that emotional intelligence to actually step back and assess what you're doing and move forward with that. Without using your animal brain, by being reactive and jumping at that situation. And I wonder how much too, I know from my perspective, the times when I've been reactive in the past, a lot of it came from not knowing what to do, not, being unsure, being in feeling like you're out of control. And then from out of control, because you're out of control, it's like, how do I react to this situation? and that's when your animal brain kicks in, and then you start doing those defensive moves to protect yourself is what I've found from my experience. And having that a broader experience of situations gives you much more options, which leads me to the other point that I use a lot, is asking the right questions of yourself, rather than using asking like, why is this happening? Because that generally doesn't lead to a great answer. It's like, well, being clear about, firstly, clarifying what you want, going, this is what I'm choosing to have happen, and then asking the question, how can I get there? And I found in that mental process, which you talked about, discuss, and I took that discuss to be also discussing with yourself. It's asking yourself the right questions changes your approach going forward is something that I found works very well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, as individuals, our pressure points are different. Everyone reacts differently. So what a situation may cause pressure for someone else, someone else may look at that and go, what's your problem? That's not pressure, this is pressure. But I think if there's people around you that are under pressure, even if you think they shouldn't be, it's also been having that ability to help those other people when they do get into that situation. So being able to be aware of the different situations around you and how people are reacting. So if you see someone who's, call it, starting to melt down because something isn't working for them, or they're cracking under the pressure, like if you see someone drowning in the water, if you go and help them, you can actually get them out of the water. And the same thing applies if someone's under pressure and they are blurred and they can't do a self-diagnosis of why or how they got there. Be aware that you asking some questions or helping them could make the difference between them, sinking further into a deeper pressure versus popping out and understanding that perhaps it wasn't that bad. So being aware of the people around you and the things and helping those people, as if you're a leader, that's what a true leader does. They don't, make fun of people or go, what are you carrying on about? You're pathetic, get up and get going. That's not the answer all the time. So having the ability to see people under pressure around you and helping them is pretty important as well.
You raise a good point.
Julian, I see it as a chef. Not that I'm a chef, but I see it as you're trying to cook on stove and you've got 4 or 5 different pilot lights going, and there's timing of everything. When do I put this in? When do I take that off? To make sure we've got the right thing at the end. And from a leader's perspective, we're going to make sure that all those pots and all the recipe and all the ingredients and timing and stuff, like our staff, our clients, maybe our family. So it's almost like being in a circus sometimes and knowing what to do at the right time to get the right outcome.
True.
One of the points you raised there, Julian, which I think is really relevant, was you talked about focusing on helping others. And I found from those times in my situations when I've been under pressure, when I'm focusing on myself and going, how am I going to deal with this? It becomes difficult. But when I then, as the leader, shift my focus and going, and how am I going to look after these people? How am I going to help them do what they need to do? That then shifts that focus from me internally to an external focus, which makes that process a little bit easier to work through, because it's you shift it from that internal thing where you're struggling to external, which I found relieves a bit of that tension within your body because you're not so much stuck in your mind. And I found that really helps relax the situation, and that helping others work through their problems it disassociates you a little bit from that stress that you're feeling, because it's then someone else's problem that you're helping out. It's not internal. I found that works really well to diffuse that initial emotion tension that you're feeling inside yourself.
Yep. And I think the other thing is predicting or looking out for future pressure. So if we don't jump in our time machine, as I say, and we fast forward to the 4th quarter of this year, no one really knows what's going to happen in our Australian economy when the government turns off the support mechanisms for businesses and people. So another way is to think about, okay, what if this happens? What if my business doesn't fire up? What if my income does get sliced and diced? What if I don't get my job back in Virgin Airlines or Qantas, for example? What am I going to do? So if people you don't want to be negative and overthink things, because you can't always predict the future. But is it worthwhile saying, okay, if this happens, I'm in this situation, that's going to cause me pressure and stress. So what can I do now to alleviate that? Is it, do I stop my spending now? Do I have to sell my house now? You don't want, I'm not saying you rush out and panic, but trying to also see things coming that you may react to or be triggered by, and trying to, I guess, put some padding in around you now, so that when it does happen, you've got like a shock absorber there that takes some of the impact away, versus walking into a wall of fire.
When it happened with myself, with my business at the start of the isolation, I had to go back to the old remedy of, prepare for the worst and prepare for the best and expect the worst. I see it as more of the how I've always done it, is the Irish mentality of, well, what's the worst can happen first, and hopefully we're going to get right at the end and get what is is the best. But as you said, put those supports in around you, and try and do it when you're thinking clearly, rather than under pressure, because that does come back to experience. But if it's too much, as I said before, the first D is distance, and when you're mentally right, which is your second one, your defence, start talking with your banks and your staff and all that sort of stuff to make sure that you're going to be that reading the play that one step ahead.
The point there, combining what both you, Julian, and Pete, you just both said, really being clear about where you want to go as opposed to focusing on the problem makes a big difference as well. When you focus on the problem, that kind of expands inside your mind. You're thinking of all the things that can go wrong. You're noticing even more things that go wrong. However, on the other side of the coin, if you start to go, well, this is what I want, all right, this is the situation, and like you said, Pete, you've got that tough situation. It's like, well, what do I need to do? I've got a finance issue. How do I solve that issue? What do I want? I want to have less of a finance issue. I can talk to the bank, and focusing on the outcome gives you those options where if you go, well, how am I going to pay my debt? All of a sudden you start to go, well, I don't have any money. And that increases that worry inside yourself. So shifting the focus, as you were talking about, Julian, before, being clear about what planning for the future, having a clear goal, I've found really helps make that change so that you can move forward and feel less stressed and cope with those pressures.
One thing I wanted to add today, because when we spoke about this topic, there was a number of scenarios that were going through my head, and the first one was the internal one of thyself with in a meeting, and you're starting to feel that stuff, as we spoke about before, Damien, of recognizing those feelings and stuff like that, but making sure that the depending on yourself, the outside controls the inside, or the inside controls the outside. But being aware of that, and if there's too much noise in the meeting, turn the noise down. Ask for the noise to be turned down. If there's too much light, if there's flickering light, if there's people walking in and out, so minimise a lot of the stuff that adds to that recipe of disaster. So you can think clearly, like from a personal safety perspective. If there's 4 police telling one person what to do, that person who is agitated and probably in fear is going to become more agitated and in fear. So one person talk, etc. So limiting the white, I won't say white noise, but the things that go on around you, so people can think more clearly.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that also leads into, if people are under pressure, there's a physical thing to it as well. And everyone, what's your outlet? So I love going for a run, and I think there's a lot of studies and proof that any form of when you exercise, it releases a certain amount of chemicals into your brain, so it makes you feel good, and that brings up is that that distracts you from the day-to-day pressure you might be in, because if you're sitting, whatever your situation is, if you're sitting in the middle of it, it does seem like a snowball getting worse. If you can take yourself physically out of the situation for some period of time, which then also brings up meditation. Now, I don't do meditation. I've tried it once, and I do need to probably revisit that. But that's obviously, my wife's a kinesiologist and Reiki master, so I see that, and you can see the benefits of that, of how you deal with pressure from a physical, point of view as well.
That movement is.
When I work with, sorry, Dan. When I work with predominantly male clients who have got emotional anger management issues, I don't sit them in a room and talk to them, make them stay in a chair. I find out what their physical outlet is, as you were saying before. So some people like playing a game of pool. Some people like shooting a basketball. Some people like. So I involve myself in that activity with them, and you'll be surprised how many men, especially, want to open up a little bit more because they aren't restricted, not sitting down. They're actually doing something like that, and then the chemicals, adrenaline, endorphins does kick in, and they'll get much more success from that.
That movement does make a big difference. I've found, from my perspective, I recognise that sitting down and working through things, it doesn't necessarily release the pressure. So as you're aware, Pete, I have big whiteboards at my house, and I use them regularly where I will stand up and then I'll write things on the whiteboard and just flesh out those ideas. I'll step back, and with that physical movement of going backwards and forwards, writing, coming back, looking at it from a wider perspective, then coming forward, just that physical movement I found releases a bit of that stress as well. And the other aspect of that, which you were talking about, Julian, is that going for a run. The same token, I've used that quite regularly for when I've been stressed, is just let it all go. I'll jump on the cross trainer that I've got at home, and I'll just sit on that for 20 or 40 minutes, just not really thinking about anything, just focusing on the movement, and just, as you were saying, Pete, distance yourself. That distances, I found distances my emotions from that stress. And then I step off that and I probably feel good because I've got, dopamine and serotonin surging throughout my body. That makes you feel good. And when your mind is in that frame where it's feeling good, it's actually about 33% more effective in how it operates, because it's got that wider focus. When you're stressed, you have that narrow focus, like blinkers are on, you can't see beyond that. When you're not stressed, your mind is more open to recognizing things which are going to help you solve that problem.
Have a look at people when they're on the phone. Most people that I know are on the phone, they walk and pace. That helps them think more clearly. And then externally too, when you're in a meeting or when you're having discussions with other people, with years of what I've been doing, I body watch. And you can see when someone's starting to get a little bit agitated or under stress. And so that's another way of then changing maybe your dialogue, which again is number 3, your discussion on how to control the horse, if you know what I mean.
It's giving yourself permission. What you said there is really relevant, Pete, because I've done that quite a lot in meetings where I've been chairing a meeting, I haven't been sure what to do, and I'll get up. And I'll literally get up and start talking as I'm walking around the room. And maybe because I'm chairing the meeting, usually I have that discretion. But even when I'm not, there are other times where I'll get up. There was a funny story where I was having a meeting. I was with a lawyer and a barrister and going through the process. And then I was doing that, and the barrister got really uncomfortable. And he said, "Look, can you just sit down? I can't." So it's like, okay, I'll do that. But it is giving yourself permission in those situations where you're feeling the stress to do what you need to do, because that releases, giving yourself that permission to do that releases some of that stress, because you feel it's bringing back that control, I believe, by saying, hey, well, I need to sit up, or I need to walk around a bit. That's giving you that little bit of control. Once you get that little bit of control back, all of a sudden you feel a little bit more confident, and then you can actually start to control those other situations as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing from the physical point of view is, people turn to alcohol and drugs when they're under pressure as an escapism, and there's different levels of that. There's the people that drink their X bottles of wine per night or beers or whatever that may be, and then I think you've got you can come down the totem pole where you come home from work or a situation and you go, stuff it, I'll go and grab a beer, and you have one. You might have you might only have 2 beers, and then for that person, then they might have 6 beers, and it kind of temporarily makes you feel good, and that's what alcohol does, but it's also a depressant. And then you wake up the next morning, guess what? That pressure you had the day before, it's still there. That's not going to, carry it away. And then there's antidepressants and all those other medications that people start taking, and we hear the stories of people, who become dependent on that. So that's a whole nother area of I think, once again, coming up to where we are today and what's going to happen. This brings up the whole issues of additional, extra people going through mental illness, people that would never have even had to worry about how to spell the word. So that there's a lot of things like that I think are flying around in our society, and and people often just don't reach out for that help, or they try and deal with it themselves.
It's an important point that you raised there. My dad, and I learned from him in that regard, because he's helped a lot of people where they were drinking, and his quote was, "Don't try and drown your problems, the suckers can float." So, and I know that is a very true point. Alcohol doesn't make you feel better, neither does smoking. All it does is change your state. So you're feeling uncomfortable. It's not necessarily making you feel better, it's just making you feel different.
And it's so important. Even firearms. Like I was doing that with security when I was looking after people, and the more I relaxed my breathing, especially under tests when you have to do your qualifications, etc., I just slowed down my breathing, and I got like a really, really, really good result. I wasn't that au fait with firearms, but I tried to put the martial art training with the breathing into that, and it was surprising how much it turned around and made the job a lot easier. So, but for years and years and years, if you recognise in your body about stress and stuff, and actually, internalise and start the breathing aspect and slowing down your breath rate, the clarity comes a little bit quicker. You're back to Adrian. All good, Damien?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened then. Zoom just quit, and I lost you. So
I'm recording after you fell off, so it's all good.
Oh, beautiful, fantastic. And yes, I missed that, so I'll let you continue on with where we're at.
I know we're just talking about when Julian brought up before about meditation early on. It sort of the breath is so important. If you feel yourself getting all worked up to concentrate on your breathing and slow that down, and even then it comes back into those D's again, of giving yourself a little bit of distance and actually saying to the meeting or the person you talk to, "Can you just give me 5?" Or I've just got to check on something, so I always have an escape. So I've just got a text from my wife, "I'll just be 2 secs," or something like that, to give yourself a bit of space and start that breathing relaxation, clear the mind, and then go back into the discussion.
One of the other things I've found that helps a lot too is when we shift the focus, I was talking before about from internal to external, because a lot of times in those situations where we've got those pressures and that, especially if there's conflict with someone else, that you're immediately thinking about what you're going to say next, and so your mind is focused on that, which creates that pressure. Whereas I found if you actually stop focusing on what you want, or what you're going to, well, not stop what you're focusing on, but stop focusing on what you're going to say next, but actually listen to them and ask questions, and use that distance that you're talking about. Before you say anything, count to 4 in your mind. Generally what will happen is the other person will give you some more information, which is useful and helpful, but it gives you that space and creates that distance to gather more information, so you can make more informed decisions and cope with that situation a bit better. So I found that process of actually understanding to shift that focus from what you're going to say to listening to what they're going to say helps gather that information, so you actually feel a little bit more stress, because you're getting more information. You're actually taking back that control again, which is why generally you're feeling stressed, because you don't feel like you are in control.
Very true. I mean, silence and pause is a very powerful negotiation tool, but it does give you time, and time can make all the world of difference when you're understanding a situation, as you said, Damien, all the people around you. It's gathering information. And if you are under pressure and you can feel yourself starting to wind up like a spinning top, that's a great way to diffuse that as well. As we started at the beginning of the conversation about, getting triggered. So how do you minimise that as well?
One thing I wanted to, sorry, David, just to add on to that, in a discussion is, as Damien was saying before, where one person talks, the other person listens, and then to clarify what they're talking about, you ask questions back. But if you're listening to counter or beat them in that discussion, then you've just turned it to an argument where you're trying to make someone else think what you're thinking. And so yeah, that's the internal balance that someone needs to understand, I think.
The other aspect that I wanted to bring, I made a note here of, is also to remember that what you might be perceiving as going on may not be everyone else's perception, because there's many times where I've thought I'm looking like, I feel like I'm out of control, been in that situation, it's high pressure, there's people around, and I feel like I'm not in control. And then I've had people come up to me afterwards and go, man, you handled that so well, you're just so calm, and you sorted it all out. I didn't feel like that. That's not what I felt like was going on inside me. I just was going, oh my God, I'm not sure how I can handle this. But that was not everyone else's perception. Everyone else looked at it and gone, wow, how well did you handle that situation? How much in control you are. So recognizing that just because you're feeling that internally doesn't mean that's what's being projected externally. And that helps being able to distinguish between those two and recognize that maybe that's not the perception of what everyone else is feeling, gives you that control again as well.
And that's that persona of being they call it cool, calm and collected, being perceived to be in control. As you said, you could be like melting down inside. As soon as you externalize that, then that can feed off out to other people around you. They see, if you're a leader, for example, and you're losing it or you're not in control, they see you melting down. The rest of the team are going to sort of scratch their chins and go, oh, well, if he can't do this, I've got no chance of doing it. Whereas even if it might be a hopeless situation and you're under enormous pressure, but if you can still sort of, let's keep moving forward, the rest of the team will follow you. And that's the difference between, once again, a good and a bad leader. It's like any sporting event. You got the captain on if the captain sees the scoreboard and says, listen, sounds a bit cliche, we can do this, we can win this, just that positive attitude can bring the rest of the other players with you. And as we all know, things can turn around.
I talk about the hats a lot with my work, and say from a martial arts point of view with the Karate Dojo, when people walk through there, I tell them just to let all outside go. So the pressures from work, relationships, finances, just let it all go. Come into the dojo and just train. And I guarantee after 15, 20 minutes, they've forgotten about it. If I bring up, so what happened today? It all comes back again. So I try and say the same in workplaces and relationships, knowing which hat to wear at the right time. Yeah, I've got some stuff going on at home, but that hat is off. I'm going to walk through the workplace, put the work one on, and be in that bubble, in that mindset, because if I let those outside factors influence, it's going to end up with the wrong outcome.
All right, we're nearly out of time. Is there a key takeaway you want to give our audience before we close it up?
I think just in general terms is, when you see yourself under pressure, is to, I guess, understand why you're in that situation. Secondly, just to try and be calm, just to step back, take a deep breath and apply a logical brain where you can. And that can make an enormous difference to the situation that's right in front of you.
5 words: distance, defense, dialogue, diffuse.
Perfect.
Fantastic. There's some wonderful takeaways there for everyone coping internally with the pressures that are going on. So this has been Exceptional Effort Business Sunday with Julian White, Pete Keogh, and myself, Damien Andrews. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much, everybody.